Speaking of dialed in, on the line, Senator.
Adam, great to be with you.
Great to be with you, man. Thank you so much for calling in, and thank you so much for wanting to eliminate the IRS. It's driving me nuts.
Boy, I'll tell you, April 16th is a day when a whole lot of folks, move into a simple flat tax and just padlocking the IRS. I think that is a powerful populist issue, and today's a day when it's on people's minds.
Well, if you want to talk about an issue, and here we are always talking about, gay rights or immigration or whatever it is, the transgendered community or something, fine. But that doesn't impact the entire country.
Yeah. Literally everyone.
This impacts, hopefully, literally everyone who's born into this country. So it is a good place to start in terms of policy. I don't, and Senator, you tell me, it seems weird when politicians get really caught up in nothing and they're missing sort of the big picture. Why do they do that?
A lot of times what politicians are trying to do is distract the voters with smoke and mirrors rather than talk about the issues that really matter to their lives.
So what would you do, and I always hear about the flat tax and all that kind of stuff, and of course everybody should champion this cause because the poor people are saying, hey man, we're tired of rich folk not paying their fair share or even paying taxes. Can I tell you, by the way, Senator, as a rich folk, I am devastated. I grew up my entire life with poor people going, well, as soon as you get rich, you just buy a windmill and you write it off and you don't pay a penny in taxes. I get reamed for taxes quarterly. Like, it's not once a year, 4 times a year. Yep. I just get punished and pummeled. I had no idea it was going to be like this.
Well, and the sad reality is much of the political rhetoric you hear is just not true. So for example, the Democrats love to say that Republicans are the party of the rich. But here's the truth of the matter. The rich do just fine under big government. Big business does fantastic under big government. It gets in bed with big government, has armies of lawyers and lobbyists and accountants. The people who are getting hammered are the people who are struggling. Right now today, this is an astonishing statistic. The top 1%, the millionaires and billionaires that the president loves to demagogue, earn a higher share of our national income today than any year since 1928. The rich have done well under big government, but who's getting
vote
hammered?
Democrat.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, who's getting hammered?
But the people who are getting hammered are young people, they're Hispanics, they're African Americans, they're single moms, they're people who are struggling.
Yeah.
To achieve the American dream. They're people like my dad who 57 years ago fled Cuba with nothing, couldn't speak English, had $100 in his underwear, and washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. Those are the people getting hammered right now.
Well, what's different versus now versus your father's America when he came here from Cuba? How did he get here from Cuba? You could do it back then.
Yeah,
right.
that was before
He came legally. He came on a student visa. He had fought in the Cuban Revolution. He actually fought with Fidel Castro.
Wow.
Now, he didn't know Castro was a communist, and none of the kids fighting did. They just knew Batista was a cruel and oppressive dictator. And when he was a teenager, Batista's thugs threw him in prison and beat him halfway to death.
Like he stole a horse.
And he fled to go to the University of Texas in 1957.
So what is different between your father's America and our America in 2015?
Well, if you look to American history and American economic history, you can see a clear cause and effect. Every time the federal government pursues the policies of out-of-control spending and taxes and regulations, the result is economic stagnation and misery and malaise. The result is people who are struggling find it harder and harder to achieve the American dream. On the flip side, every time we pursued the policies of tax reform and regulatory reform, lessening the burden of Washington upon hardworking Americans, the result has been incredible economic growth. That was true in the 1920s. It was true in the 1960s. It was true in the 1980s. What we've got to get back to, you think of all the young people right now are coming out of school, and they're up to their eyeballs in debt, and they're scared. Are they going to get a job? Are they going to start getting skills towards a career? Or are they going to work part-time as a barista in Starbucks? We've got to get back to an environment like the environment my dad saw as a teenager coming out of the University of Texas, where young people can come out and have 2, 3, 4, 5 job opportunities, begin building skills to build a career. And the way you do that is getting Washington off of the back of small businesses so they can create jobs and opportunities so young people can have a better future.
Well, I know, especially living here in California, and so many businesses fled to your state of Texas because it just becomes impossible. I tell everyone the Joel McHale, I don't like to name drop, Senator, but Joel McHale, a friend of mine from The Soup and many movies, he's from Washington State, I think is where he's from, but he bought a house up in the Hollywood Hills. And he knows I'm a former contractor. And he said, hey, I'm putting a pool in the backyard. I'm going to put a pool in the backyard. I just said, good luck. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, next time I see you in a few months, tell me how that's going. And he got back to me, and he came back a few months later, and I said, how's that pool going? And he's like, oh, God damn. And I said, what? And he said, soils report, environmental impact report, test. And he kept going and going and going. He said, I couldn't afford a $400,000 pool in my backyard. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, the kids use a neighbor. There's a gay couple lives across the street. They use a gay guy's pool. And I said, good. The contractor doesn't get to work. The guy who manufactures the rebar doesn't get to work. The guy who makes the gunite doesn't get to work. The pool man who's going to be servicing that pool weekly does not have a gig. Everyone's lose-lose, and I drove Bryan Cranston to the airport. He's shooting Breaking Bad, New Mexico. Supposed to be in Riverside. Not. He's leaving. Pool guy's leaving. Everyone's leaving.
A lot of names.
So should we get some more regulation going?
Well, I guess you can be glad that at least Cranston didn't bring the Mexican drug cartels to shoot up Riverside.
That's good.
Speaking of government helping small business, Ted Cruz, what you guys can do, especially in Texas, is patent reform. What is your? Because that's where all the patent trolls go take people to court because it's very favorable for them. What is your take on that?
I think it is very important to do two things at the same time with regard to patent reform. That number one, we need to limit abusive litigation, and I've long been an opponent of trial lawyers abusing the system to enrich themselves at the expense of job creators.
Thank you.
But
I
number
got sued.
two,
yes.
I think it's important to protect intellectual property, and so you've got to make sure that people who are innovators, people who are inventing and designing new technologies have the ability to protect their IP. And so it's a balance in terms of how you reform it, and you want to do both at the same time.
Well, where do you come down, and then I'll ask you about taxes, and we'll let you get on with your busy day, which I'm sure is very hectic. But I want to know, I feel, Senator, that we make rules, and then they get away from us. And we end up hurting ourselves with our rules. It's like you go through the airport, you see the 68-year-old elderly woman going through the metal detector, having to be carried because we can't push her wheelchair through it. And then at some point, somebody yells at her to take her shoes off and put them through the scanner. And it's like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why? Yes, there should be rules that protect innovation. There shouldn't be guys who hang their shingle in Lubbock, Texas, and sue everybody around them to just get paid off for the threat of taking them to court. Why can we let common sense start trickling back into the land that is built on common sense?
Well, I think we need to, and part of the problem is the way Washington works right now is that Washington's fundamentally broken. That we've got, I've said a lot of times, I think the biggest divide we have politically in this country is not between Republicans and Democrats. The biggest divide we've got is between career politicians in Washington in both parties and the American people. And I think the central issue that's going to be facing this country in 2016 in the elections is, do you want Washington playing a bigger and bigger role in your life, or do you want more freedom, more opportunity to get back to the Constitution and get Washington out of our life? And part of the problem when legislation on patent reform or anything else comes up is right now the way Washington resolves it, it's a battle of the lobbyists. Whoever has the most lobbyists ends up getting elected officials rushing to hand out special favors. We need to make government less and less relevant in our lives and have as much decision-making as possible being made by individual citizens, by each of us, rather than some unelected bureaucrat in Washington.
I concur, and, you've got Hillary Clinton on one side, you got Jeb Bush on the other. What do you think of the two?
Oh, look, I like Jeb Bush. I think he was a good governor in Florida. I think people are going to have to make a choice of whether they want to elect someone who's going to continue business as usual in Washington, is going to continue to grow government spending and power and debt, or whether they're going to have someone who's going to stand with the people and who's willing to stand up to both parties in Washington. If you want someone who'll go along to get along, there are a lot of choices.
Jeb Bush being one of them, perhaps?
I'll let the voters figure that out and assess the record of each of ours. But I'll tell you, in my time in the Senate, what I've tried to do more than anything else is, number one, tell the truth, and number two, do what I said I would do. And for that reason, when we launched our campaign for president 3 weeks ago, the New York Times explained that Cruz cannot win because the Washington elites despise him.
That's the greatest compliment ever, right?
There you go. That's the central point of our campaign. If you want the Washington elites, go with someone else. But if you want to change things, then we've got to be willing to stand up and say this doesn't make any sense.
This just in. Hitler and Charles Manson, not a fan of Ted Cruz.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if you know that. Put that on the bumper sticker. TedCruz.org is where you go if you want to support Ted. I want to support Ted. I love me some Ted Cruz. And I just finally want to ask, I've heard all about the flat tax. I just don't know how it would be implemented and what the rate would be and how it would work.
Right.
So could you coach me up just a little bit?
So I have laid out broad principles. We have not yet rolled out a specific tax plan. We are developing it right now, so we will be rolling it out in the coming months. But what I've said is we should have a simple flat tax that's fair, that lets every American fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. So it's a simple rate that applies to everyone, and which would enable us, number one, it would reduce hundreds of billions of dollars of compliance costs that people are paying all across this country. Number two, it would produce enormous economic growth. But number three, it would enable us to abolish the IRS, to get government out of our lives in a very fundamental way. And the most potent reason to support a flat tax is it reduces the power of Washington politicians. Right now, where lobbyists in Washington focus the most is on special tax exemptions and loopholes. There are more words in the IRS code today than there are in the Bible.
Wow.
If you got flat tax that applies to everyone, that means politicians have less power to extract favors and to extort the private sector. It keeps power where it belongs with the American people.
That's a very good note to go out on. TedCruz.org is where you go if you want to know anything about Ted and contribute and find out about him. Very impressive background, by the way. Very impressive story. Senator, thank you very much for phoning in.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you.
God bless you. Senator Ted Cruz, everybody.